his smile that I began to reconsider as that picture did unfold, that his strength was not in his rope and arm, nor in his legs now bent and bold, but it was in his cowboy spirit that even age could not control. And then I thought I'd never seen a finer thing than that cowboy grown old. It's true there's heartbroken lovers and there's tragedies untold, and we do lose something of ourselves when the cowboy finally goes. But like his, our true strength is in our spirit, that even death could not control. And I know I've never seen a finer thing than that cowboy growing old. So, before I read these other two poems, I have a quick story to share about my association with Mr. Reed. When I'm not dressed up like a cowboy, I have a job at the district attorney's office. I'm an officer and an investigator at the DA's office. And Mr. Weed had a case with our office. Quinn Martin back there handled this case. Thanks for being here, Quinn. So I want to assure all the family that all those charges against Mr. Weed have been dismissed. Everything's okay. I'm just kidding about that, of course. Mr. Weed was a witness. Mr. Weed was a witness, a material witness in a case. And so I got to know him through that, and I gave him some rides to the courthouse for him to testify. And something happened that had never happened to me before in my 10, 12, 13 years in law enforcement, and in my career prior to that. He invited me to his house for a meal. So I accepted, and I went to his house for a meal and had one of the most fascinating, enjoyable, and learning experiences that I'd ever had. After we ate a hearty meal, consisting mostly of beef, we went out on the porch, and Mr. Weed poured himself a glass of wine. And then he packed his pipe and lit it up, and we talked further, and I thought I'd gotten well enough to know him well enough that I could tease him a little bit. So I said, Mr. Weed, what do your doctors say about you eating all that red meat, drinking that alcohol, and smoking that tobacco? He said, well, I don't know what they would say. I said, why don't you know what they would say? He said, they're all dead. Both of the poems that Mr. Weed wanted you to hear are written by Robert Service. I haven't checked with Mr. Service's agent or his estate. I have not obtained his permission to read these poems to you tonight, to perform them. But I want to make this promise before you that I'm going to give him 1/2 of everything that I receive for reciting them tonight. The first is The Shooting of Dan McGrew. And I apologize for having to read this. I didn't have enough time to memorize the poem, so bear with me. A bunch of the boys were whooping it up in the Malamute Saloon. The kid that handles the music box was hitting the jag-time tune. Back of the bar in a solo game sat Dangerous Dan McGrew. And watching his luck was his light of love, the lady that was known as Lou. When out of the night, which was 50 below, and into the din and the glare, there stumbled a miner fresh from the creeks, dog dirty and loaded for bear. He looked like a man with a foot in the grave and scarcely the strength of a louse, yet he tilted a poke of dust on the bar and called for drinks on the house. There was none could place the stranger's face, though we searched ourselves for a clue. But we drank to his health, and the last to drink was Dangerous Dan McGrew. There's men that somehow just grip your eyes and hold them there like a spell, and such was he. And he looked to me like a man who'd lived in hell, with a face most hairy, and the dreary stare of a dog whose day is done, as he watered the green stuff in his glass and the drops fell one by one. Then I got to figuring who he was and wondering what he'd do. And I turned my head, and there, watching him, was the lady that's known as Lou. His eyes went rubbering around the room, and he seemed in kind of a daze, till at last the old piano fell in the way of his wandering gaze. The ragtime kid was having a drink. There was no one else on the stool. So the stranger stumbles across the room and plops down there like a fool. In a buckskin shirt that was glazed with dirt, and I saw him sway. Then he clutched the keys with his taloned hands God, could that man play. Were you ever out in the great alone when the moon was awful clear and the icy mountains hemmed you in with a silence you could almost hear? With only the howl of a timber wolf, you're camped there in the cold, a half-dead thing in a stark-dead world, clean mad for the muck called gold. While high overhead, green, yellow, and red, the northern lights swept in bars. Then you behaunch what the music meant, hunger and night and stars. And hunger not of the belly kind, banished with bacon and beans, but the gnawing hunger of lonely man for a home and all that it means. For a fireside far from the cares that are, four walls and a roof above, but oh, so crammed full of cozy joy and crowned with a woman's love. A woman dearer than all the world and true as heaven is true. God, how ghastly she looks through her ruse, the lady that's known as you. Then on a sudden the music changed, so soft you scarce could hear. But you felt that your life had been looted clean of all that it once held dear, that someone had stolen the woman you loved, that her love was a devil's lie, that your guts were gone, and the best for you was to crawl away and die. 'Twas the crowning cry of a heart's despair, and it thrilled you through and through. I guess I'll make it spread misery, said Dangerous Dan McGrew. The music almost died away, then it burst like a pent-up flood, and it seemed to say, repay, repay. And my eyes were blind with blood. The thought came back of an ancient wrong, and it stung like a frozen lash. And the lust awoke to kill, then the music stopped with a crash. And the stranger turned, and his eyes they burned in a most peculiar way, in a buckskin shirt that was glazed with dirt. He sat, and I saw him sway. Then his lips went in a kind of a grin, and he spoke, and his voice was calm. And boys, said he, you don't know me, and none of you care a damn, but I want to state, and my words are straight, and I'll bet my poke they're true, that one of you is a hound of hell, and that one is Dan McGrew. Then I ducked my head, and the lights went out, and two guns blazed in the dark, and a woman screamed, and the lights went up, and two men lay stiff and stark. Pitched on his head and pumped full of lead was Dangerous Dan McGrew, while the man from the creeks lay clutched to the breast of the lady that's known as Lou. These are the simple facts of the case, and I guess I ought to know. They say that the stranger was crazed with hooch. I'm not denying it so. I'm not so wise as the lawyer guys, but strictly between us two, the woman that kissed him and stole his poke was the lady that's known as Lou. I don't know about you, but with all of his accomplishments, it must have been difficult for Mr. Weed to stay grounded. Maybe he had somebody like I have, like my wife, who was pretty grounded. I had a prior career where I practiced law in Atlanta, and after a couple of years, I began our firm. We represented some clients and had some cases out of town, so I did some traveling and stayed in some hotels that were nicer than any that I had ever stayed in my life before. It was a new experience for me, and so I came home one time years ago, and I said, Leah, you know what I would like? And she said, what would you like? I said, you know, I would like in our bathrooms, I would like for the toilet paper to come over the top of the roll. and then to have, what's so funny about that? So I'd like for it to come over the top of the roll, because this is my experience in these nights. So I'd like for it to come over the top of the roll and then to be folded in a little triangle. And she said, that's what you'd like? And I said, yeah, that's what I'd like. And she said, you know what I'd like? And I said, what? She said, I'd like a man with more on his mind. Cremation of Sam McGee. There are strange things done in the midnight sun by the men who toil for gold. The Arctic trails have their secret tales that would make your blood run cold. The northern lights have seen queer sights, but the queerest they ever did see was a night on the marge of Lake Labarge. I cremated Sam McGee. Now, Sam McGee was from Tennessee, where the cotton blooms and blows. Why he left his home in the South to roam round the pole, God only knows. He was always cold, but the land of gold seemed to hold him like a spell, though he'd often say in his homely way that he'd sooner live in hell. On a Christmas day, we were mushing our way across the Dawson Trail. Talk of your cold! Through the parka's fold, it stabbed like a driven nail. If our eyes we'd close and the lashes froze till sometimes we couldn't see, it wasn't much fun, but the only one to whimper was Sam McGee. And that very night, as we lay packed tight in our robes beneath the snow, and the dogs were fed and the stars overhead were dancing heel and toe, he turned to me and, "Cap," he says, "I'll cash in this trip, I guess. And if I do, I'm asking you, you won't refuse my last request." Well, he seemed so low that I couldn't say no. And he says with sort of a moan, "It's the cursed cold. And it's got right hold till I'm chilled clean through to the bone. Yet 'tain't being dead. It's my awful dread of the icy grave that haunts, that pains. So I want you to swear, foul or fair, you'll cremate my last remains." Well, a pal's last need is a thing to heed, so I swore I would not fail, and we started on at the streak of dawn, but God, he looked ghastly pale. He crouched on the sleigh, and he raved all day of his home in Tennessee, and before nightfall, a corpse was all that was left of Sam McGee. There wasn't a breath in that land of death, and I hurried horror-driven with a corpse half hid that I couldn't get rid because of a promise given. It was last to the sleigh, and it seemed to say, "You may tax your brawn and brains, but you promised true, and it's up to you to cremate those last remains. Now a promise made is a debt unpaid, and the trail has its own stern code. In the days to come, though my lips were dumb, in my heart, how I cursed that load. In the long, long night, by the lone firelight, while the huskies round in a ring howled out their woes to the homeless snows. Oh God, how I loathed that thing. And every day the quiet clay seemed heady and heavier grow. And on I went, though the dogs were spent and the grub was getting low. The trail was bad, and I felt half mad, but I swore I would not give in. And I often sang to the hateful thing, and it hearkened back with a grin. Till I came to the marge of Lake Labarge, and a derelict there lay. It was jammed in the ice, but I saw in trice it was called the Alice May. And I looked at it, and I thought a bit, and I looked at my frozen chum. Then, "Here," said I, with a sudden cry, "is my crematorium." Some planks I tore from the cabin floor, and I lit the boiler fire. Some coal I found that was lying around, and I heaped the fuel just higher. The flames just soared, and the furnace roared, such a blaze you seldom see. And I burrowed a hole in the glowing coal, and I stuffed in Sam McGee. Then I made a hike, for I didn't like to hear him sizzle so. And the heavens scowled, and the huskies howled, and the wind began to blow. It was icy cold, but the hot sweat rolled down my cheeks, and I didn't know why. And the greasy smoke and an inky cloak went streaking down the sky. I don't know how long in the snow I wrestled with grisly fear, but the stars came out and they danced about ere I ventured near. I was sick with dread, but I bravely said, I'll just take a peep inside. I guess he's cooked, and it's time I looked. Then the door I opened wide. And there sat Sam, looking cool and calm in the heart of the furnace roar. And he wore a smile you could see for a mile, and he said, "Please close that door. It's fine in here, but I greatly fear you'll let in the cold and storm. Since I left Plumtree down in Tennessee, it's the first time I've been warm." So, I'm going to conclude with Bob's permission with a short story that's a true story. And I don't tell this story very often because it's so embarrassing. And I think that Bob Sr. would get a kick out of this. So I mentioned that I practiced law in Atlanta, Georgia before I moved out west, but I didn't grow up dreaming of being a lawyer. I grew up dreaming of being a cowboy. So when I was 41 years old, we sold our house and we moved out west, and Leah and my son and I worked on a cattle ranch. So this is a story about our first roundup. Now, before we moved out here, we had horses, and I knew how to ride a